Nobody's still here. Good evening again. I'd like to call the committee of the whole for the Village of Cary for September 19th, 2023 to order with roll call, please.
Weinhammer? Here. Dudek?
Here.
Collier?
Here.
Stefani?
Here.
McAlpine?
Here.
Walrath?
Here.
Thank you. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Moving to the public comments portion, the public is invited to make an issue-oriented comment on any matter of public concern not otherwise on the agenda. We have nobody signed in. Does anybody like to address the committee of the whole? Okay, then we will close that at 7:23. We have one item on our committee is a discussion regarding new revenue sources discussion. You know what that's code for?
No, it's code for a new revenue source.
Yeah, code for new revenue
We're
sources.
not going to say the T word, no.
Kelly, I will gladly turn this topic over to you.
Thank you, board. So, as the board has seen, probably for the last 5 or 6 years, when we've done the budget workshops in January, February, March, we've put together a list of potential new or additional revenue sources to kind of talk about those funds that maybe don't have revenue sources or funds that need additional revenue sources, like MFT for, some road improvements. At our last budget workshop, we showed again this slide, had discussion, and from the board, the two that are highlighted in red are ones that the board wanted to discuss or have further discussion or move forward with. The cable franchise fee, we did then get approved. That one to effect May 1st, from that 4% to 5%. And the other one that the board wished to have further discussion on was the non-home rule sales tax. So that's what we're here tonight to discuss. As you can see, then that is on the next slide. Thank you, Courtney. Non-home rule sales tax, so that's an estimated increase in the annual revenue of approximately $650,000. That assumes 1%. You can increment by 0.25%. The maximum is 1% rate limit. One of the questions that the board members had was categories that included, and I have them all listed there. So general merchandise, apparel, furniture, lumber, automotive, filling stations, agriculture, manufacturers. No food or prescription medical drug costs are included in that sales tax. And then kind of the process for going forward, if this is something the board wished to do, would be a referendum, which Courtney is going to discuss a little bit about that process.
Thank you. So this, you may remember this from the CIP presentation, just to show you our projected 5-year funding. That's across all of our funds, and then what our recommended 5-year capital expenditures were. So you can see there was quite a bit of a difference. Part of that really was related to our road program or our roadway maintenance expenses. So when we're talking about this potential new revenue, these funds would have to be utilized for public infrastructure. I've gone ahead and just given the definition of public infrastructure as the Act defines it. So it is focusing on roads, sidewalks. You can look at water and sewer line extensions, stormwater drainage and retention facilities as well, just to name a few of them. So as we know, there is currently no funding source for the Capital Projects Fund, and that's where we currently pay for our roadway maintenance expenses. So that's our sidewalk improvements, patching, striping, etc. And then just as a reminder, our annual MFT revenue is about $730,000 a year. That falls short of the estimated $1.6 million that's required to maintain that satisfactory PCI, which is 70. I just have this slide here that shows you where that 1.6 keeps us at that 70. That 70 was defined, I believe, previously when the goal created their strategic goals. And you can see we had started falling just slightly as of 2023 at that 68.7. And with our current MFT revenue, unfortunately, we could continue to see the PCI fall just due to the lack of resources needed, the lack of revenue. What I've also got here to show you is the surrounding community sale tax rate, specifically what their additional rate is. So you will see a number of communities are identified as home rule. This is either due to population or because they've previously had a referendum to become home rule. You'll see there's an assortment here between, half a percentage up to Carpentersville, for example, as 2%. So just a number of surrounding communities here. Just
And to clarify, we can only go up to 1%.
Yes.
So.
And then how the process works related to a referendum. So the village board would have to pass an ordinance that says, hey, we would like to place the referendum on the ballot. We must do this at least 79 days in advance of the election. The election can be any election that Cary voters are voting in. So it doesn't have to be an election that one of you is in, for example, any election. So primary that's coming up in March, that would be an eligible election if you so chose. Once the ordinance is passed, then the village clerk must certify that question to McHenry County's clerk to place it on the ballot at least 68 days in advance. And then prior to the election, what we may do is provide information regarding the referendum at informational only, such as, what is this rate, where would the funds be used, what that potential revenue could be. So it's pretty strict on what we could provide to the public. And then if approved, an ordinance would then be passed to establish that tax. And then we would file that documentation with the Illinois Department of Revenue. And then, and one of the reasons that we always said this is on the low tier is because then the Department of Revenue collects and administers that tax rather than being something that our staff would have to take on, like the Places for Eating tax requires.
Or the vehicle sticker where we would have to, implement a new software or something like that.
Exactly. So is there any questions about the process? Okay. No.
We'd have to inform the public, and we'd have to, Karen Darch, who's the mayor of Barrington, they just went through the referendum, and they passed a home rule, and they got 10,000 people or whatever. But there is a cost. There is a cost to it about getting the information out. I'm going to talk to her about that with regards to what it is. But on another note, through my capacity through the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus and McHenry County Council of Governments, these are items that we're working on with our state legislature because the difference between a home rule and non-home rule is the population. To be home rule, you have to have 25,000 people or more. Non-home rule is under 25,000. And that's we just had this meeting yesterday about this. From what everybody can tell, it's an arbitrary number. No, it's not tied to any specific document or specific cause. So we're looking at this too because, I had mentioned with Courtney this afternoon about going over all this today that, if we're going to do something like this, we might as well just do a referendum on home rule. It allows us to do this as well, but it also gives us more power to manage ourselves rather than falling under the state statutes on a lot of different things. It gives a little bit more power. So, that's something that we can discuss too. But I think it's important that we look at a level playing field. You look at the surrounding communities that are already doing this. We've got other non-home rule communities that have gone to referendum and that have passed the non-home rule sales tax, which is up to 1%, and they've had success with it. And we would have an obligation, as we have all talked about through our CIP projects, and all the budgeting and all that different thing, that we need a funding source for our roads. As Courtney just indicated, when you see that number that we've been so proud at for so many years is starting to do a downward tick. And that's something that, because we don't want to let it get any further down, because if we have to start rebuilding roads, then we're really in a big, it's different than just, doing milling off the top lift and putting something on, that's completely different than having them deteriorate so much that they need to just be completely rebuilt. I have to sneeze. Turn this off.
And to be clear, the cost would be related to if we did mailing.
Mailers, yes, which we would have to do.
Can both items go on for referendum?
Well, I think if we do the home rule, we can automatically have the 1%.
Right, but yes, you can have up to 3 referendum questions. I'm not sure you would need it here.
My thought was that some people will not. The home rule fails more than the sales tax, correct?
Yeah, well, Barrington's just passed theirs
Yeah.
with the home rule, which gives them all this other authority. We would have to do a really good job of educating people and the benefits.
I think we should do so for the board as well. What is included in home rule? Because to Trustee Collier's point, people hear home rule and the first thing they think is sales tax. If there are other actual benefits of the way we can self-govern, manage ourselves, free ourselves a little bit from some of the state items and mandates, that could be as beneficial as any sales tax we might talk about. So there is more to the question than
Right.
just the sales tax.
Yeah, I agree. Start with the board educating. Right, Mr. Euler?
Public education is critical.
Yep. So, I mean, these are things, they're difficult conversations to have. You have to look at things, and with talking with Trustee Walrath this morning about this very same thing, about looking at the various rates and maybe coming up with a commitment to the community about freezing our part of our tax levy for a period of years to show that we're looking at, we have to look at, we meet with developers, we meet with people all the time, and we meet with other taxing districts. We make decisions based on 50 years of success. How are we going to continue the momentum of where we are, and how are we going to pay for this? The cost of government, unfortunately, is funded through taxes. You go through businesses, people make, they raise their prices all the time. You see this all the time, and, people just have to pay it. And when it comes down to the value that you get from the Village of Cary for that, we're the last two things. Our total tax bill is like 5.14% of that entire tax bill. And you look at the big bang that you get for the monies that you're spending, for that. Everybody just paid their tax bill a couple weeks ago, so it's a big thing that we all worry about. But I think it's a conversation worth having. I really do.
Courtney, would this tax, let's assume we only had this and didn't go with the home rule. That's, like you say, I agree, Rick, it's a very good conversation to have. But let's say you only had this. Could that be a dedicated source for sort of like a large capital improvements bond that we could put out there and clear the vast majority of that inequity and things that we need to get done all at one time?
Sell bonds or something,
Yeah.
and then use that as the revenue source to pay.
That's the repayment source for the bonds. So, because every year we sit, even if rates go down, the cost of doing any of this stuff is gonna go up. So we don't ever get ahead of the curve. And if you have a dedicated source of repaying, I mean, it's like when we did the
building
bonds, the bad bonds years ago,
Yeah.
right? You had a dedicated source for it. Take all the money out, maybe a year or so from now, hopefully when rates get a little bit lower, and get it done. It's got to get done sooner or later, and, piecemeal never works.
Right, so when you say dedicated source, for issuing debt, you're essentially indicating there's a backup revenue source?
That's it, the
Right,
1%
yes.
tax,
So you
yeah.
can tie a bond issue
Correct.
to 2 revenue sources, essentially general obligation bonds, which you would be responsible for no matter what you issue. But if you have an alternative revenue source, the interest rate is more likely to go down. So here, this would be an alternative dedicated revenue source.
So it's something to think about.
Right.
I would personally like to see some sort of analysis, maybe come out of the finance area, to see, would this make sense? How much from a bond standpoint could be left with that sort of, even if you discount that to 75 basis points instead of 100 basis points, I'll take it to $500,000, be more conservative. Because you know, some people are gonna go, I gotta pay an extra whatever, I'm gonna go to Crystal Lake, right? There are people who just have that kind of mindset. So I'm not gonna be suggesting that we'll have, what was it, 730,000, but if you can reduce it by something, what size bond could we get at today's marketplace? It'd be good information to know, I think.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Well, if they go to Crystal Lake, they'd be paying the 1%.
But that was a bad example.
0.75,
If they
0.75.
went
0.75,
to,
0.75, yeah.
Round Lake Beach, okay. is
Yeah,
that better?
okay. Yeah, I get it. But, you know, these are conversations that we have to educate ourselves on. And it's been part of our budget process for a number of years, and it's time that we, you know, had the conversation.
Well, I just think we have to be proactive versus reactive.
Yeah.
So we have to plan for this versus kicking the can. Because, again, sometimes it's gonna come due, and the time we don't want it to come due was when our roads, when we hit, wasn't it Woodstock that had this? It had to do a big referendum for their roads deteriorated so much.
Yeah.
That they had to spend probably double, or I don't wanna exaggerate, they had to spend a lot more than they would have had to do had they maintained it.
You did Lake Zurich, too? We just heard Lake Zurich had the same problem, too.
Okay, so just to clarify for staff, direction here is to get more information related to, you know, what comes with being home rule, and then also looking specifically into potential bonds for the roads. Okay, and then you'd like that information presented at a future committee of the whole meeting?
Yes.
Okay, absolutely.
Kelly, did you have anything else?
No, that was all I had, so.
Okay, any other questions for staff regarding this?
Great job.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. It was nice having Kelly back in the room.
Yes.
Well, good. Okay, I think that's about it. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned at 7:40.